Okay, so we're back for our next reading lesson, and today is what we call a skill station day. And ever so often we have a skill station day where we don't have to use our books, but we have to go to the back of our workbook. So you're going to be in the very back on page 212. So I want you to pause this while you find that page, okay? Because we're going to be working on that in just a second. Okay. So I will need you to look at this that's on the screen, because today we're going to be talking about two different things about a story. We're going to be talking about a story's sequence, which is its plot. When you were little, you probably had to read stuff and put it in order. This happened first, and this happened second, and this happened last. So that's what we're going to be doing now. That's called a plot. And we're also going to learn about conflict. Every story has a conflict. If you ever watch TV and you watch a movie of some sort, there's always a conflict. The conflict is the problem that has to be solved. And there wouldn't be any fun in watching anything or reading anything if there was no conflict. So let's look at that. Okay, so what I wanted you to do is I wanted you to think about a piece of candy. Because a piece of candy with the wrapper still on is going to help us in thinking about a story's plot, the sequence of things. This happened first, and then second, and then this, and then that. All right, now I want to read you this story. It's very short, and I want you to just listen very closely, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about it, okay? Ralph was a knot. He was required by law to help rid the country of all the dragons. Ralph started out on his horse to find a dragon. He was loaded down with a sword, 2 muskets, and a small cannon. Ralph met a dragon and was preparing to kill it. The dragon saw Ralph and begged not to be killed. It promised to pack up and leave the country, provided that Ralph didn't try to hurt it. Ralph let the dragon go after it promised to go to a faraway country. Ralph continued his search for other dragons. Okay, so I want you to think about that story, and let's kind of break that story apart a little bit so that we can kind of understand. And we're going to use this piece of candy to help us understand. All right, so what kind of information in the very beginning of a story? What kind of information might you get in the beginning of a story? Well, you might get the names of the characters or kind of what the story is about. That's going to come in the beginning of this story. What information did we find out in the beginning of the story I read? Well, it started out by saying Ralph was a knot. And what he had to do was he had to rid the country of all the dragons. So that's what we learned in the beginning of the story. We learned that Ralph was a knot. So the largest part of the story is the middle. That's that's where the good candy's at. That's the middle. That begins, the middle part begins when you learn about the story's problem. Can you guess when the middle part of the story ends? Right here, when the problem is solved. So this is when it starts and this is when it's solved. The problem can also be called the conflict. Okay, these two words mean the same thing. A problem could be a conflict. So what was the problem or the conflict in the story about Ralph? He had to get rid of all the dragons, didn't he? That was his job. When did the middle part of the story begin? When he learned he had to get rid of all the dragons. When did the middle part end? When he agreed to let the dragon go into the faraway country. So this is when he learned he had to kill all the dragons, and this is when he let that one dragon go. That was the end of the middle. All right? So what kind of information might be told at the end of a story? Well, basically, in the end, you're going to learn about what happened to the characters, how everybody liked the solution or didn't like the solution, or you might find something else about the conflict and how it was solved. What was told at the end of the story of Ralph? He continued in his search for other dragons. That was the end of the story. That's right. All right, so I need you to look in your work text on page 212. At the top it says, telling a story. What's the problem? Now it says to read this paragraph, and then it wants you to number these events in order. Circle the event that tells what the problem or the conflict is. Okay, now I want you to press pause, and I want you to read this little paragraph right here. See if you can put them in order, and then turn it back on, and I'll see if you got it right. All right, did you do it? Let's see if you got it right. Okay, so number 1 should be Rapunzel was a very happy girl. That should be number 1. If you got it wrong, that's okay. You can put the answer right beside it. The second one was Rapunzel was locked in the top of a high tower without any food or water. That's number 2. Number 3 should be the first one. The prince called his men together. That's number 3. That's the third thing that happened. The next thing to happen is the prince and his men drove the fire truck to the tower and rescued Rapunzel. That's number 4. And the last one is the prince married Rapunzel. Now, the instructions also said to circle the event that tells what the problem or the conflict is. Do you know which one of those is the conflict? It should be number 2. Rapunzel was locked in the top of a high tower without any food or water. That's the conflict or the problem. All right, you see the piece of candy at the bottom there? We're going to find the parts to this plot of this story. Now we're just going to write the numbers of the sentences, okay? So the beginning would be number 1, that she was very happy. So you put that in the beginning. Where it says beginning, you're just going to put a number 1. Now the middle part of the story is going to be number 2, 3, and 4. That's kind of the juicy, goody, candy part of the story. So you're going to put 2, 3, and 4. And the end is what happens in the end. That's the prince married Rapunzel. So that's number 5. Now, all those events in that story, the necessary events, are called the plot. So you just learned what plot means. Very good. All right, can you turn to, let's see, the next page that we have is page 213. Can you turn to that page? All right, it says these sentences below were taken from a story. Make a story plot by numbering the sentences in the correct order. So can you pause it and put those in the right order at the top of page 213? Okay, let's see if you did it correctly. Are you ready? All right, there once lived a girl named Hilda. That should be number 1. Okay, number 2 should be one day Hilda and her sister were kidnapped by pirates. That's number 2. Number 3 would be Hilda managed to escape. Number 4, Hilda found the police and together they saved her sister. And number 5, the police arrested the pirates. Did you get those? I hope you did. All right, so now what we have to do are those sentences, you are going to have to write those in the right sections at the bottom. So for instance, where it says beginning, so that means number 1, which happened in the beginning. Where it says there once lived a girl named Hilda, you have to write that sentence right there in the beginning. Make sure you use good handwriting so I can read it very well, okay? So you're going to do that in the beginning. The middle part of the story is going to be sentences number 2, 3, and 4. And the end is going to be number 5. So I need you to pause this for a few minutes while you write those down, okay? And then turn it back on and we'll continue. Did you write all those down? I hope you did. All right, we have 2 more pages to do. One of them is just part of the story. Can you turn the next page? 214 and 215. We've been talking about the plot of a story. Remember, that's the sequence of events, how things happen. Now we're going to talk about something called conflict, which we've already said a little bit about it. The conflict is the problem that has to be solved in the story or in the movie. All right, so on page 215, there's some questions that we have to take from what we have to read on page 214. So I'll read page 214, but you have to follow along. So make sure you're following along as I read. It's called the send-up. But when I got home, the caseworker's car was in the driveway. If you haven't figured it out, a caseworker is a social worker who watches out for a certain number of foster kids and keeps up with how they're doing. Caseworkers bring both bad news and good. I hopped off the bus and went inside, loosening my tie. I didn't care if I looked like a slob because it was choking me even worse now than I knew the caseworker had come. "There he is," Miss Stevens said pleasantly when I came in. "I have a surprise for you, Bill." It didn't sound like I was in trouble. My heart stopped pounding. "What's up?" I asked weakly. Mom and Dad Wilson were looking at me with smiles that seemed glued on. "A very wealthy aunt of yours has been granted permanent guardianship of you." "I didn't know I had an aunt," I said. "Neither did we, but her claim checks out, and she's a very pleasant woman. She means to put you in a private school and travel with you in a few years. Oh, she's wonderful. Owns a stable of horses and keeps dogs. You will love her." "Couldn't I stay here?" I asked. Miss Stevens looked uncomfortable under her top crust of delight and happiness. "I'm sorry, Bill. She's been granted your permanent guardianship. She is, after all, your aunt." "Okay. You'll be moving out there in 2 weeks." "Out there?" I asked. "Where's out there?" Miss Stevens' smile wavered. "San Francisco. Won't that be fun?" Okay, let's look at page 215 and see if we can answer these questions according to what we just read. Now, what is the main conflict in that story? That means the problem. The problem is that, did you say Bill has to go live with his aunt? That's the problem. He has to go live with his aunt, but he doesn't want to. So can you write that down on number 1? He has to go live with his aunt, but he doesn't want to. On number 2, it says, how could this problem become even worse? You write down what you think, anything you think that would make that problem worse. Okay, do you see the middle part of this page where it says make it bigger? It says to read each paragraph below to find out the main conflicts in these books. Circle the sentence that tells what the main conflict is, and then answer the questions telling what could make the problems even bigger. Doc Erickson has just started a llama farm north of Peabody, Wisconsin. Penny, Jack, and Scruggs visit to help out. As soon as they get there, however, strange things begin to happen. Is somebody trying to make trouble? Now, what kinds of things could be going wrong? And you write down anything that you think might be going wrong. Now, we do need to circle in that paragraph, we need to circle what the main conflict is. Strange things begin to happen. That's the conflict, that's the problem in that book. So circle that where it says, as soon as they get there, strange things begin to happen. And then you write where it says what kinds of things could be going wrong. Just write a couple of things that you, 1 or 2 things that you think might be going wrong. Anything. Okay, I want you to do the same thing that we just did on that last one. I want you to do it yourself. Make sure you circle the main conflict of the book, and then I want you to write some of the things that could be happening, okay? All right, and make sure I get to see what you wrote there, okay? All right, that's all your lesson for today.